today we are looking at our type 1. Sometimes our type 1 is known as the perfectionist. I don't always like to go by the names because any of us can be a perfectionist, or any of us can kind of resonate with some of the titles. But if we are going to label it, I like the title improver. And we'll talk a little bit about why that might actually be more accurate. And we'll also hear from our informants if that might be more accurate. So we're going to look at the type 1 profile, and this is really for 3 groups of people. The first group that today is for somebody who knows without a doubt they are a type 1, to give them some additional insight into what that means and how it might be showing up in their work life. We're also going to be talking about the type 1 for those people who are wondering, am I a type 1 or a type 3 or a type 5 or a type 8, to give them some additional information into their own typing journey. And then if you know you're not a type 1, but have a type 1 in your life, whether it's at work or at home, this will hopefully give you some more information about where they're coming from and conflict and conversations, and to better understand and have maybe more productive conversations with the ones in our life. So right off the bat, our type 1s, the thing that makes the type 1 a type 1 is this striving to feel perfect. And at the end of the day, they want to feel good, to have high integrity, and they tend to be very focused on the common good as well. And we kind of talked about, they're known as the improver, might be a better name for them, because they are very focused on making things better, whether it's themselves, the groups that they're leading, the communities that surround them, or just a cause or a project. And I sometimes think of like Captain America as the ultimate type 1, really, always doing the right thing, even if, it may get you into trouble. I'm going to do the right thing. I have that understanding of what that is. And they tend to be a little bit more task oriented. We've covered our type 2s in the past, not to say that type 1s cannot also be relationship focused, but they are kind of looking what needs to be done to get us from here to there. If type 1s had a book, it might be the good to great book. They're always kind of looking, how can I take what's already good and make it great? Their superpower, one of many, is this ability to be incredibly methodical and just understand how to execute on this big vision they have for making things better. They tend to be really rational, very disciplined, structured. Like I said, conscientious, understanding of what's not just best for me, but what's going to be best for the group, for the community. Sometimes, though, people experience them as a little rigid, maybe a little critical. They're also very critical of themselves, and maybe sometimes too detached, because they are so focused on the task, what needs to be done. Their problem-solving style is, listen, we are sensible, rational adults here. I'm sure that if we can just get to work, we can come up with a solution. And then when it comes to, let's see here, I'm covering up our slides. When it also comes to being clear, I talked about they have this ability to have that big vision. They're also going to create the order, the clarity, and they're going to be comfortable and okay most of the time enforcing that order, enforcing the policies, where some people may not want to speak up. They're going to say, hey, nope, that's not right. We need to do it this way. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this energy, but before we do, I want to bring in our informants and hear a little bit about what it is like on the inside of the type 1 world. So I'm going to bring Katy up, and I have Linda, and I'm going to take away our slides for just a minute so we can see everybody. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
Katy, would you introduce yourself? Just what do you do, where you're from? And then I would love to hear how you knew you were a type 1.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, my name is Katy Lumsden. I'm an HR practitioner, actually. I wasn't always an HR practitioner. I have a background in creative spaces, visual communications, calligraphy, that kind of thing. But my awareness of Enneagram really came after my pivot into human resources. I had a wonderful mentor when I first moved into this area who was a huge fan of the Enneagram. I didn't know anything about it, but she seemed such a sensible person. I thought that there's something to pay attention to here. And then when I was doing a master's degree, we did a huge chunk of work around organizational behavior. And we did a lot of psychometrics and various instruments. And Enneagram wasn't one that was part of the program, but it was one, again, I was drawn to because of people talking about it. And actually, I found it was kind of like a hub for all the other instruments and psychometrics that we've done. It helped me make sense of a lot of the things that had come up for me in the others. And it was unequivocal when I first did through the Enneagram Institute, when I first did my assessment, I was an Enneagram Type 1. And there were lots of things in their definitions that resonated with me and made sense of some of the findings from the other instruments that I'd used. So that's my Enneagram path so far.
Was there anything, because sometimes I joke, but it sometimes is most of the time it's true that it's typically the type that maybe you don't want to be, or there's some things that kind of make you cringe that you're like, unfortunately, that's my type. Was there anything as you read that resonated?
That's where the learning is, Sarah.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, the things that, made sense for me were particularly, well, firstly, that overarching kind of reformer or improver piece. I really recognized that in myself. But then the detail focus. I mean, I'm a brilliant proofreader. I love proofreading for people. But where that sort of gets me into difficulties is working with people who actually ultimately have taught me a lot about sometimes it's better to have something done than perfect. So that's the perfectionist piece can lead me sometimes into that really sort of stuck space of detail focus. And the learning then is, from other people and going, yeah, sometimes it's okay to let that go a little bit.
Yes, which, we all can struggle with that and sometimes, but I hear that a lot from one. So you are not alone. Linda, what about you? Would you introduce yourself, what you do, and how you knew you were a type 1?
Yes. Okay. So I'm Linda Kolean. I am from Holland, Michigan. And currently I am in sales support for a pharmaceutical company. Largely my background has been in financial services. There's some brokerage services, employee benefits. There's a lot of retirement planning and employee benefits. So more recently it has been like project management and sales support. So how I learned that I was an Enneagram 1, there was a girl that I was following on Instagram a couple of years ago. And a lot of things that she posted, she hashtagged Enneagram 2. And I'm like, what is this Enneagram stuff? And so I looked into it and I took the test. I took the test on Truity.
Okay. Yes.
I had to take the test twice because I think the first time around I tested as a 2. And I'm like, some of that makes sense. So then I took it again, same night. And I'm like, okay, Linda, be honest. As a 1, it's like you want to be seen as good. And it's like, wow, I felt like I had to answer the questions a certain way. But then I'm like, nope, I'm just going to full throttle, just be super transparent. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I'm 1 wing 2. I can see that. And I think what really stood out to me was like, so yes, the perfectionist, and I don't really love being called that because it just seems so cliche.
Mm-hmm.
Seems so basic. Like, isn't everybody a perfectionist? But maybe not. The improver, I really like that. But I think what really resonated was the rigidness. Like, I don't like to look at myself that way, but I'm like, you know what? A lot of the way everyone responds to me, I am rigid. The right part of things, I'm like, no, that's not me. I'm an open-minded person. And it's like, yeah, but how long did it take you to get there, Linda? Yeah, so there's like some growth opportunity there where it's like, okay, I'm not completely rigid, but I am. And that was where it like really resonated with me. And it's like not something that I'm proud of, but it is something that I'm constantly working on. So I think that one of my favorite things about being an Enneagram 1, I like that I'm able to, so to be an improver, I am trying to find out like about everyone else's Enneagram styles. Anyone who will share with me. So I've made the mistake of like, at first when I found out about this, I was telling everyone about it. And I'm like, well now I need to know what your Enneagram is. So that will be a better relationship. So if I do that, like we're going to have an amazing relationship. But then people start to feel like I'm trying to fix them, I'm sure it comes off that way, but it's like, no, I'm working on fixing myself. So I'm sure that you would want to be like the best version of yourself too. So.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. That fixing kind of energy.
Like, for me, it's just like, well, I'm feeling so good about this discovery. It's like I found this gem and I just want everyone else to know about it.
Yes.
But I don't think that everyone feels about it that way, because when I talk about the Enneagram, they're like, oh, what did you say?
Like, how do you pronounce it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then like, it's a personality test. I'm like, it's not just a personality test. It really helps, self-discovery in ourselves and within other people too. And I think it strengthens relationships on a personal level, but also in the workspace too.
Absolutely. Yes, you said that perfectly. And something else that you said for those that are listening to this and maybe still are questioning what their type is, I think what you shared is one of my biggest pieces of advice is that the only person you have to be honest with is yourself. And there are certain characteristics or qualities that maybe we feel like we should be based on our gender or our faith or society. And so that can make the typing process much more difficult. But, like you were saying, just kind of taking an honest look. Okay. So a lot of times, and I'm going to ask you about this. I know for you ones, especially, this question about maybe your challenges or what comes difficult for you will be easy for you to answer. But what I want to talk about first is what strengths. So we talked about the strength of precision and being able to come up with structure and being disciplined to get things done. Based on those, or what else, other strengths you have learned about the Enneagram, what is one that you have seen show up for you, and how have you used it in the work, the career that you have now? If you would be willing to share first, Katy.
Yeah, there's lots in there that I think I can see now has served me well and got me to where I am. And part of it is what you had in your introduction, actually, Sarah, that for ones, oftentimes the reforming or improving piece and draw can be so strong that it allows you to cut across norms sometimes, or conventions, which it has sometimes got me into difficulty, but it's oftentimes allowed me to create a space where there wasn't one before. And that's what I love. For me, it brings a kind of imperative, if you like, that I'm going there, people, and you can come with me, and I suppose that's part of the rigidity as well, of going, well, I can see this and I'm going there. And it may not be in the most conventional way you've ever seen. It may not actually go along with a protocol that we have, but I know, because I'm a one, that it's ethical, and I know that I'm doing it with integrity and alignment. So it gives me a safe space in me to work, even where other people might be looking, going, what now? Do you know? So I think I've realized that it's that combination of things, coupled with the conscientiousness to see things through, have really, my career pivot, for example, coming out of a very creative role into something that other people perceive as not creative at all, working in the human resources space, to the point where people were genuinely quite worried about me when I sort of announced this. And I was saying, no, this is equally, if not more creative, because it is totally aligning with that improving and reforming thing. It allows me to kind of go with my gut in terms of maybe seeing team or group needs where logic and analysis would take me forever to get there. There are certain things that I feel and I go with it into spaces that perhaps other people hadn't seen. So I love thinking about all that in the context of the Enneagram and the type 1 profiling.
I'm glad you mentioned that, the creativity part, because I think sometimes we get kind of reduced to certain qualities and then other qualities get associated with other types. So like 4s are the creative types, right? But all of us can be creative. All of us can be structured and disciplined. It's just kind of that intentionality and allowing sometimes too. And so that's a great reminder that just because you're creative doesn't mean you're a 4. All of us can be, and we have plenty of very creative ones that I have come across. So I'm glad you brought that up. Linda, what about for you? What is the strength of the one that you have seen show up in yourself?
I think the strengths are being structured, being disciplined. The black and white, I do think that is a strength as far as being methodical about decision making. It's easier to make decisions. Okay, for example, I have worked in a couple of highly regulated industries where it made it, if I was training someone for something, or if I was explaining products, or like 401k withdrawals. So I used to do employee benefits. That was something that I was really passionate about. It was easy to be passionate about and explain like withdrawal rules or contribution rules or distribution rules. Because the ones they excel in, like fact-based things. Yeah. So it's easy to like, so I'm not surprised, Katy, that, you are an HR. Like I love seeing a 1 in the HR role, because it's like, yes, like that is going to be someone who follows the rules, but not just the company, but also for the greater good of maybe their people, because they tend to have integrity in the things that they do. For whatever reason, that is really important to us. So structure, if I am entering in a new role where there isn't so much of it, it's been something that I can create for myself. And SOPs, standard operating procedures. If there's a role that I've been in where they don't have those in place, I tend to become an expert in the role that I'm in, or the task, being super task oriented. I tend to those and introduce those and distribute them among the organization. So that way everyone else can save time and we can all be doing things the correct way.
Yeah, the right way. Yes.
That's important to us. The right way, which is probably the way we're doing it.
Right. It's probably, yes, the way that we're doing it. Okay. I want to hear from you guys, or the two of you, on some growth and stress topics. And one of my favorite things about the Enneagram, Linda, you mentioned several of them, is the fluidity of it, and that when you get it, it's not just these are your 5 strengths or this is your color. It's here's your starting point. But depending on what's going on in your life, how much personal development, professional development you've done, you may look very different than the 9 other ones in a room. Or you may have 10 ones in a room that all look very different for all kinds of reasons, wings, arrows, all this stuff. So, one of the things that has been really helpful in the typing process, as well as the kind of how do I use the Enneagram, are looking at the arrows, or is looking at the arrows. And for those that aren't familiar, our type 1, will use it's known as the stress arrow, or possibly the supporting strategy of the type 4, which is known as striving to feel unique. And how ones will tend to use that is that, just like Linda said, and Katy, you've mentioned it too, I know what the right thing to do is. And so I'm okay being unique or standing alone in that knowing, in that integrity. And so they'll kind of use that energy of the 4 being unique, not going with the flow with everybody, and to support that strategy of striving to feel perfect. On the flip side, their neglected strategy, which I want to hear from both of you on this, which ones tend to, out of all the types, will tend to neglect this one the most, is the type 7, known as the enthusiast, where they're striving to feel excited, because that energy sometimes for a 1 can feel like undisciplined, unstructured, unplanned, and that can be terrifying for the 1. Yeah. Ironically, that is known as the growth arrow for our 1s. And when you not become a 7, but flavor your type with some of that 7 energy, you just become this really, it just kind of enhances for the good of you and those around you. So I would love to hear, in this one, Linda, I'll start with you, how you've seen either of those or one of those kind of show up, or what's resonated with you throughout your own Enneagram journey with those.
Okay. So I definitely see the, when I start to get into, because I know there's healthy levels of being a 1, maybe not so healthier levels of being a 1. That's where I kind of catch myself. But it won't happen for like maybe a week or so, or maybe several weeks, where it's like, those were some toxic traits or things that I was doing and feeling, as far as like, okay, it's easier for me to see in myself, I think, because I know, like, I have a sister who is a 4. And so I start to see parts of and she's super unique. She's super fun. But then there's a side of us where we can get together and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if this is good or not. Like, I think we're going down this rabbit hole of like being super hard on ourselves and showing up in the workplace that, that can be that it feels terrible. Like, we have this harsh inner critic. So for like, I feel bad because once I discovered that I was a 1 and how I might be coming across to others, I'm like, wow, for myself, I'm even harder on myself. And so I have seen that 4 in me, and I catch myself. And with like the last 2 years, I'm trying to see the things that are causing me to have like this downward spiral, which are things like the perfectionism, like not handing in something unless I'm 150% sure that it's my absolute best. That has held me back. And not just in work, but in school too. So I'm taking classes right now, and that has been so stressful. Like, it's been, I'm proud of myself because I've been able to make like top % of my school. Then now I'm like, now that I'm there, I want to stay there. And it's just, the reality is you got to let it go. You can't always be up there, and not being at the top doesn't, I constantly have to reassure myself, like, it doesn't make you a lesser version of yourself just because you didn't show up like here today. Like, you can show up here. And like, I've had to like teach myself that. So that's what the 4. Now I have a 7 in my life who teaches me like, it's okay to have fun. The 7 in my life is like super intense. Like, I love you, but man, you are super intense. And like, for me as a 1, for me to have fun or to just be carefree, it doesn't come easy. It's like, I have to earn those things. Like, I'm constantly having to earn myself, like, privileges. It's like, oh, okay, well, if I want like that 3rd cup of coffee or something, I better get like a ton of work done before I do that.
Linda, yes, that is such a common just a common feeling that I hear. You described that perfectly. And, talking about ones and fours, the other thing that they have in common, and sometimes why they get confused, you may think, oh my gosh, they're so different. But both of those types have this feeling of feeling like defective or like very critical of themselves.
Yes.
Yes. And the nuance difference, not all, but many times, is that fours just feel like I'm inherently defective. I was born this way. I will never be good enough. Whereas a one tends to feel something's wrong with me, but if I just work harder, I will get better.
Yeah. And it feels like, man, that's toxic because
Yes.
there has to be good enough. And it feels like that's a hard place to get to. But I don't know if you get this too, Katie, but it's like everyone around us is like, you're so amazing. You're so good. You're so put together. And it's like, no, I'm not. I'm not.
Oh, Linda, that's so resonant. That's so resonant. And it's funny because I've just recently finished studies as well. The master's degree that I spoke about, that was a part-time thing over 3 years, and it's just in the autumn we concluded it. So everything that you said there about the pressure on myself to show up here always and consistently, and when you've done it once to feel you can't let that slip then. That's exactly my study experience. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And I think I was thinking about the four especially, and that uniqueness thing. In a way, that's my tester of how sort of healthy or unhealthy I am. Because I remember, that's been a feature of my life always. I remember, being very early years in school. I think I was only 5, and we had a girl in our class who, was a bit of a, well, she liked to have her gang around her, let's say, and if you didn't have the same as her for lunch, you couldn't sit with her, in the lunchroom. And I remember after a couple of days of this, at that very young age, going, no, that's not right. I don't want to do that. And I was very happy to take myself, and sit by myself for a little while. And, gradually people went, oh, do you know what? I'll go and sit with Katie because I'd rather have my own lunch. Thank you. So that kind of changed things. And it just, when I was reading a while ago about that kind of I'm unique thing in the Enneagram Type 1, that incident came to mind, and my very strong sense at age 5 that I didn't mind placing myself apart because of something that I thought, hang on a sec, that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But I know also that, when I'm in alignment with myself, that sits well with me, that's setting myself apart. But if I start to get stressed or tired, quite quickly that downward spiral begins, and then suddenly uniqueness is, I'm just weird, or I'm not performing at my best now, or I'm out of alignment with everybody else, and that middle piece of I'm happy to be unique is the healthy piece of it, and the piece is, oh no, I have to do more work now to stop being so. So it is that never-ending cycle of, like you say, like kind of earning your privileges, earning some sense of ease. Actually, I think that for me, that's the crux of the oneness is if it doesn't feel easy, then I'm not doing it right.
It's the hard work.
Yeah.
Work harder. Yes. And some of it's really interesting too, just to see, I've thought about doing a series on like how the type's energy shows up in society, because, both of you talked about the earning, and I hear that in the workout industry all the time, like come in and spin so you can earn your turkey dinner, or, whatever, or, and like earning the cup of coffee. I got to do the work, or, earn. And it's like, if it's like, right, it's something's wrong. If it doesn't feel hard, if it's easy, like, it's not right.
Yeah, what have I missed? What have I done wrong?
Right.
If it's this easy, yeah, I must have missed something.
Anything for you, Katy, on the type 7 that you've noticed, like, as you continue to work, like how you bring in the fun and the joy and kind of the maybe flexibility?
Oh, that's a funny one for me. And it's kind of, I do make a joke out of it. I'm Scottish and I'm Presbyterian, and there's, that comes with a whole lot of baggage around, well, I'm no fun ever. Even unpacking those things, but I do feel, the conscientiousness is something that can go into overdrive seriously for me. If I'm tired and stressed, then, conscientiousness just turns into a big stick to beat myself with. And so I really, and again, even reading through the healthy to unhealthy one profiling again, before this was really helpful, because when I first did my Enneagram assessment, like that was 3 years ago at least, just starting out on my MBS journey, and I could see that I already am in a different space because I'm working much more in alignment, and a lot of the material that I looked at through my studies was around organizational change, and actually just getting comfortable with what change specialists would refer to as the emergent, and going, just, if you're on a big change program, and I realize this relates to self as much as to an organization, don't have the end goal in mind, just let it happen. And even that learning around organizations for me has helped free me up personally to be much more open to just, the spontaneous happenings, and being comfortable with that, and actually bringing the fun. It's great. It's actually new for me, really.
I love that. It's kind of detaching from the results and just kind of enjoying the process. Okay. So Linda, I'm going to start with you on this next one, as we start to wrap it up here. But both of you had kind of said something around, if you think I'm critical, then you should hear what I'm saying to myself, kind of thing. And that is one of the key things that we'll talk a lot about when it comes to understanding our ones, right? You can have so much more empathy for somebody when you're like, oh my gosh, wow, I cannot imagine how hard they must be on themselves. Some other things to consider if you're working with a 1, being led by a 1, working side by side, maybe have a 1 in your family or friendship. A couple of things that I have heard that just really annoy them, pet peeves at work, is rule breaking, arriving late to meetings, which, oh my gosh, I'm always fashionably late. So for you both today, I was like, I need to log on 10 minutes early. I'm not going to let my 1s down. Not following the process. It's like, we have a process in place. Why are we not doing this? So like HR processes, probably, yes. Making excuses. Cannot stand that. Take responsibility. Yeah. Being irresponsible. Again, sometimes 7s, kind of that neglected strategy, but all types can kind of, maybe have some of that. Annoys the 1s to no end. When mistakes are repeated, it's like, listen, lesson learned here. And then sometimes when their competence or their, their integrity or how they're doing the right thing isn't acknowledged or even dismissed. Anything that you would add to this list, or anything that you want to expand on? Linda, I'll start with you.
Rule breaking, that is pretty good. In the workplace, I am very thankful that I am in a hybrid situation. I'm not noticing, it's okay. So I think there's like a misconception here about 1s. Like, we're never looking for what's going wrong. I think it's just like we're super observant. And like, I don't know for you, Katie, but I do, I'm seen as an introvert in the workplace. So I'm like an extroverted introvert once you get to know me. But that means for me, like, I tend to be introverted. And so, okay, if I'm noticing rule breaking, it's not, I think that has a lot to do with early on in my career that I worked in such places where they were so highly regulated. And then not only that, but in the school place too, there just seemed like there were all these standards that needed to be met or rules that needed to be followed. And then even in my own home growing up, if people want to understand, like, how did you get to be a one? Why are you the way that you are? Because it was something that I was struggling to understand about myself too. Like, why am I this way? So rule breaking, I guess for me, it's bothersome because it's like, man, if I was ever caught breaking the rules, I was punished. So it feels so unfair, not for myself, but for everyone. When I'm seeing like, oh, okay, so and so gets to see them breaking the rules, but then that one like sort of got talked to or in trouble about that, but then that one didn't. It just the way that it makes me feel. I hate that it makes me feel this way, but it's like, wow, that feels so unfair for them. And you end up taking it personal, and it's like, I don't want to take it personal, but wow, like, I really don't like what I'm seeing. So working remotely has been really great for me because I'm like, I don't know what's going on, and that's probably better for me. Yeah. Now I'm just minding my own business. I don't know what's going on. All I know is I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah, the showing up late, I think in the workplace, I guess I don't feel like a lot of that is happening right now, but if I'm waiting for something or someone, I try not to let it get to me too much because there's always something else that I've got to be doing anyway. So then I just leave and I'm like, okay, I'm going to send them a quick note that I waited for them. And, now I'm off to do my thing. I think that has been growth for me, because before I think it would have been like 3 or 5 years ago, it would have been like, that was so annoying. That was so rude. How can they be so inconsiderate? But now it's like, you know what? I have other things to actually worry about. So I'm just going to keep it moving.
Yes. And that's an interesting thought. It's just like, the working remote and just kind of, understanding your triggers. And in this situation, it was probably not an option. But sometimes, like, the more that you learn about yourself, the more that you understand what your own pet peeves are and how to avoid them or how to better navigate through them. And that's why we learn about ourselves. And that's why we do these things. And it doesn't mean that you have to be okay with that. It might just be changing your environment. It might be, making some sort of change. And that's perfectly fine too. It's just knowing what you need and doing the best to get there for you. Katie, what about you? Anything really standing out on the pet peeves list or anything that wasn't listed here that you would add?
Oh, well, it's really interesting following on from what Linda was saying. I mean, if I do the Myers-Briggs thing, for example, like I'm an off the scale introvert in that, but yet I have on my LinkedIn profile, for example, that I'm a noisy introvert. So exactly what you said, Linda, I could be known as a sort of an extrovert introvert or an ambivert, depending on the context. But and it's something that has actually come back through 360 feedback, for example, that I can appear, not just introverted, but quite detached. And, that's, I think, quite a key part sometimes of the type 1. But I was interested in the first thing on the pet peeves list here and what you were saying, Linda. And I realized that for me, in relation to rule breaking, this is where my type 1, I think, can sometimes get a bit monstrous because sometimes I would take it upon myself to go, well, do you know what? Some rules are stupid rules. But it's because I said so. So, sometimes I'm okay with rule breaking, but it's because I've been the arbiter that actually those rules didn't really matter anyway.
Yes.
It's, and again, coming back to where I started with the Enneagram being a kind of a hub for all the other psychometrics and instruments that I had done in the past. When I think of, I don't know if you've come across the Belbin team roles instrument, for example, which looks at different, different types within a team. And I come up as what they call in Belbin as a shaper, which means I can work sometimes to a point that, veers sometimes quite dark in terms of, maneuvering things in the background to kind of get where I want to get to. And I think that rule breaking thing is sometimes that it shows up in that way of saying, well, yeah, rule breaking is a big pet peeve of mine, but I will be the arbiter of those rules. Thank you very much.
Right.
So that really stood out for me there. That there's perhaps not a rigidity there. There's probably less or more fluidity perhaps for me around that, but it's because that's when particularly maybe the rigidity is around, well, I can decide, even in quite well-established processes, actually that rule is stupid. So
yes,
we can go elsewhere. Thank you.
Yes, I don't mean to make everything about Captain America, but I've become into a huge Marvel nerd over the last couple of years. But I think of, Captain America, like, detaching from the team and not going along with like what people wanted him to do because he knew what the real right thing was to do. So he's going to go rogue because he knows what to do. So I think of that, and that's a great example. And you both kind of shared that. As we start to wrap this up, I'd love to hear, Linda, you mentioned it a little bit, but anything else that comes up for you, and anything, Katy, you want to add to this? A lot of times what we read about the type 1 or all of our types, we're getting from Instagram memes or maybe a book. And even what I teach, is coming from my perspective of how I interpreted that text and my influences and who I've learned from and my own type. And so sometimes what we read isn't correct, and there can be or everybody's experience anyway. And I always like to ask in these kind of conversations, is there anything that the rest of us get wrong about the type 1 energy? What should we know that maybe is like a stereotype that just isn't true or isn't true for you? Katy, I'll start with you if there's anything else that comes up.
I think in a way we went there before, but it's really around, I suppose, creativity, or that rigidity and creativity can often sit together in a strange paradox in the type 1. It can lead to great integrity in process, but for me anyway, it also sometimes leads to a third way. So I think, yeah, I mean, again, not to generalize an entire type, but right. I think it's the rigidity that often gets, that's the big label.
Yeah.
That I see around the ones.
Yeah. What would you add, Linda?
Okay, so I would definitely add that the rigidity is, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about that, because when people get to know me, they're like, you're a lot more fun than I thought you were. I'm like, what? And I'm like, what would make you think that I'm not fun? And I surprise myself too with the black and white thinking, where someone brings something up and it's like, oh, well, I've been working on this, but I think it's just maybe been the way I have been all along. Like, I do have an open mind as a 1 about a lot of things. So just because I think that I have done all the research and I have all this fact-based evidence to back up my being right in processes or things that we're doing, it doesn't mean that as a 1 that I'm not open to new ways of thinking. I think, in fact, ones are probably going to be the ones who can help lead, like, when you're working on a new idea or a project. As far as implementation goes, I think ones are probably one of the stronger employees to help pioneer that.
So well said, both of you. I'm going to share a couple of resources for anybody who is wanting to learn more about the type 1, and then we'll wrap this up with Katy and Linda. If there's anything you would add, any other Enneagram or just general self-awareness resources, books, podcasts that you would that have been helpful in your journey that you would recommend. Over on the Enneagram MBA channel, there are a couple of this or that Enneagram mysteries that we are solving between type 1 and some of the other types. So if you're in the camp where you're still trying to figure out, is this my dominant type? Some of those videos over on the Enneagram MBA YouTube channel might be helpful. And then if you do happen to know your type already, we do have fun Enneagram mugs. We have typing guides that if you know you're a type 1, we got 25 pages of all the insight, ins and outs about being that type, what it looks like at work, growth, stress, all the things. So you can find those over there. And then coming up, we will be looking at our type 5, known as the observer, or the investigator. And I know sometimes for ones, I hear that this is a common kind of mistyping. Am I a 1 or a 5? And so that might be a good one for those of you who are still on the trying to figure out your type train. What about Linda? Any other resources that have been helpful for you that you would recommend?
Well, so I use Instagram a lot, and I don't know if how much of that anyone is using, but on any platform, really, I think if you can hashtag Enneagram. So for me, it's Enneagram 1, and then there's a lot of 2s, 6s, whoever I have in my life, and I really love to learn more about. Like, as soon as I find out what Enneagram they are, I start following that hashtag, and I get to learn so much about them. And then I start doing weird things like Googling, a relationship between Enneagram 1 and an Enneagram 1, because my husband is an Enneagram 1. So that's weird. It's great. But it's weird because it feels like we're on an island all alone.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, that's one of the most popular questions is there, like, what are the best types compatibility wise? And it's just like, it has nothing to do with the type. It just has to do with, how self-aware you are, how open to growth, and where each of you are at on that. And there are a lot of good resources, funny resources as well over on Instagram. Katy, what about you? Any specific book, podcast, account, anything else that's been really helpful in your Enneagram self-awareness journey?
I don't have an awful lot to add here. I've done my assessment, and I'm growing into that and exploring it. But again, thinking of what you just said, Linda, I mean, the only 2 people in my life whose Enneagram type I know are the 2 people who spoke to me about Enneagram in the first place and got me kind of intrigued about it. So it's something that I would love to do more with, and maybe try and encourage some openness in the people in my life, just around exploring that and kind of evangelizing about how useful it's been for me. And because, as I said at the beginning, it's allowed me to kind of triangulate all the other different tools and self-awareness tools and psychometrics and things that I have used. Because it's so far reaching, it's really been helpful for me to kind of bring all of those into this kind of center fulcrum of the Enneagram.
Yes. Well, I appreciate all that you have shared. I know talking about your personality is literally one of the most personal things you can open up about. So I appreciate you both being willing to do it publicly. And I always learn so much myself hearing about, real life experiences. So I appreciate you. Before we sign off, Linda and Katy, would you tell us where we can connect with you in case there's anybody that wants to reach out and say, oh my gosh, you were in my head today, or really appreciate what you shared. Linda, where can we find you online?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I am on Instagram as just a modern mom, but you can find me on LinkedIn. If you just go in my messages, send me a direct message. I'm pretty responsive. Okay, I do have to add, Sarah, that you are one of my greatest Enneagram resources. Like, I love opening and seeing your posts. I'm like, man, she is like a mind reader. Like, she gets me.
Well, thank you for saying that. And social media gets a bad rap sometimes, rightly so, but it also can be such a fun tool. And that is how I met both of you, I think, was through LinkedIn. So grateful for that, and grateful for Linda. Thank you for being on here. And I appreciate you saying that. Katy, what about you? Where can we find you?
Again, LinkedIn is my platform of choice. I'm all over the place. It's a running joke that for so many people I know, they say, "Oh yeah, I was going to comment on that, and Katy Lumsden was there before me." So Katy Lumsden, Noisy Introvert on LinkedIn. That's where people can find me. And I have the most fabulous LinkedIn network. I've found so many riches and treasures through LinkedIn. So I'm always open to new connections and new learning. So yeah, messages I will respond to for sure.
All right. And we'll have those in the show notes when we share this in other places. So I appreciate you both so much. Thank you for being here, for all you shared. And we'll see you, it sounds like, around LinkedIn.
Yes.
It's great. Thank you so much.